Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. India was destined to be the second largest economy in 2024. Whether it would be or it would not be is a $1 million question that's facing the people of India and the world economies. Because if Indian economy fails, as it's evident it's in a shaky position today, then there is something definitely wrong somewhere. The latest report is that the GDP of India has contracted by 23.9%, and the increase in the government demand is just 6% of this fall. Why has it happened? That the economy, which was buoyant, which was galloping like a racehorse, suddenly tanks. There are various reasons. And if I look at the global picture, I find that India is possibly the worst performer among the global economies. China, challenging India militarily, diplomatically, politically, and economically, actually expanded its economy by 3.2% in April June. The same period when the Indian economy fell by 23.9%. So the difference is 26% almost. The UK was badly hurt, but the contraction in UK has been 20%, 20.4%, while India is 23.9%. The US, which is the world's largest economy, did also tank, but the fall was just 9.5%, and that's manageable. India's position is still more pitiable because it is also slowing down in terms of per capita income. If GDP alone falls, that can be because of the various factors as is India. But here even per capita income has fallen, and the granular GDP data suggests that except for agriculture, which has expanded by 3.4%, other job intensive segments have been badly affected. Construction and manufacturing shrunk by 50.3%, that's the construction, and manufacturing by 39.3%. So more than 50% in construction, 40% in manufacturing. The non-essential financial services, hotels and trade also shrank by 47%. So overall it's about 50%. And the data released in the first quarter, April, May, and June, shows that the decline is 23.9%. It was expected not to increase 20%, decrease by more than 20%, as is the British economy. But 23.9 is something beyond this word. In other words, what does it mean? That the total value of goods and services produced in India in April, May, and June this year was 24% less than the total value of goods and services produced in the same 3 months last year. So, pari passu, 2019 and 2020, it has fallen by 24%. And the major indicators, all the most of the major indicators of the economy, like production of cement, consumption of steel, also show deep contraction, shrinking. So much so that even the telephone subscribers saw a shortfall in this quarter. What is wrong is that because of the widespread lockdowns, the data quality is suboptimal. Data might be correct, might not be, but it is expected to correct. My only fear is that when it's corrected and revised in due course, you would find that the contraction is not 23.9%, it's likely to be more than 30%. The data shortfall is on the brighter side. What's the implication? Now, when GDP contracts by more than what the people thought, the economists thought, so it was thought to be less than 20%, it's almost 25%. It's believed that the full year GDP would also worsen, and that's going to be bad. The conservative estimate is that this financial year there might be a contraction of 7%. So growth, which was 9%, and India's growth since 1990, that is 20 years, has been an average of 7%. This time it's going to be minus 7%. So total growth is minus 14%. 7% not growing and 7% shortfall. And in terms of gross value added by different sectors, the data shows that, as I said, that except agriculture, where the growth has been 3.4%, all sectors have shown a shortfall. There is construction, hotels, manufacturing, minor. And it's important to note that these sectors create the maximum number of jobs in the country. So if the job creating sectors suffer, it automatically means that the future is not so bright. Unemployment is likely to increase and it's likely to lead to more and more unemployment. What causes this GDP contraction? That's a question which puzzles the normal person. Second is why the government has failed to curb it. In any economy, GDP, and what is GDP? Demand for goods and services, gross domestic product, is generated from four engines of growth. It's not something automatic. There are four pillars. The biggest engine, the strongest pillar, is consumption demand from private individuals like me and you. If our consumption increases, the GDP increases. And in this economy, this accounted for 56.4% of all GDP before this quarter. So while this was 56.4% before this quarter, it has fallen down. The second engine is the demand generated by the private sector business. So first is the individual consumption pattern, then the demand by the private sector. And this accounted for 32% of all GDP in India. The third is demand for goods and services generated by the government. And this accounts for 11% in India. And the last engine is the net demand on GDP after we subtract imports from India's exports. In India's case, the smallest is the smallest segment because our imports are much more than the exports. And that typically, as India imports more, its negative impact is already there and now it has increased. So, private consumption, the biggest engine, as I said earlier, has fallen by 27%. And that's almost the same as the total fall 23.9 and 27. And in money terms, if you convert, it is 5,31,000 crores. That's the shortfall if we compare with the last year. In 3 months, the fall has been almost 600,000 crores, 6 lakh crores. The second engine, investment by business, has fallen even harder. It is again fallen by the same number, 533 lakh crores. So the two biggest engines, which accounted for 88% of the India's total GDP, 88%, had a massive contraction. The total shortfall is 10 lakh crores, or rather 11 lakh crores, which is not a small amount. The net export demand has turned positive because India's imports crashed this time, luckily. But they point to an economy where we see that economy itself, the whole activity, has fallen sharply. And the last engine of the group is the government. The data shows that the government expenditure went up by 6%. It no way compensates the shortfall of the earlier three engines, the imports, the individual, and the businesses. And looking at the absolute numbers gives a clear picture. So, as I said, the first two have caused a loss of 10 lakh crores, and the government spending increased by just 68,000 crores. In other words, government spending increased, but it was so meager that it can cover just 6% of the total fall. So, when income falls, when the private individuals cut back consumption, then the production falls. And this is a cycle. Lower consumption, lower production. Lower production, more unemployment, further fall. And this is something, the problem. And the same logic holds for exports and imports. So, what's the way out now? There's only one thing that can be done is that the government should spend more. How? Either by spending more on infrastructure, roads, bridges, paying more salaries, increase the salaries, or give the handouts, give money to the people, stimuluses. But then they are all short term measures. They cannot be permanent measures. If the government does not spend adequately enough with the economy, then the economy might take a long time to repair. Now, why is the government not spending? You would ask. Government finances are already overextended in India. In other words, it was not only borrow, but the borrowing that's what should have. As a result, the government has been borrowing too much and it doesn't have as much money. So it has to come up with the innovative schemes. And if we look at it, government must move to revive the economy on a war footing. The first stimulus package that was given by the government was on creating favorable conditions for banking lenders. This may not have worked. Fixed investments dropped in India by 47%, which is bad. So the government has to lead in reviving the investment through public infrastructure projects. And for this, public private partnerships, PPP, and that was the concept I had advocated way back in 1989 when I presented a paper to the then Prime Minister and told him that PPP would be an ideal way. Some of the projects were taken on PPP, more were taken on boot principle, build, own, operate, transfer. And that is the way out. This expenditure on the public infrastructure would crowd the private investment and start a virtuous cycle. You spend more, and it's exactly what Roosevelt did. You remember that in the Great Depression. Hire two teams. One team in the daytime will collect leaves, and the second team in the night would go and spread the leaves they collect in the day. And the next morning, the first team will come and recollect them. The main purpose was that people had to be made to work and be paid for so that they could purchase more goods. You also have got to ensure that the government needs to implement radical financial economic reforms so that the growth is sustainable. Government cannot keep on spending for all the time. It can give a stimulus. It can give an injection. That's like an emergency treatment. You are given an IV, but IV is not a permanent food. But then this enables the nation to get up, rise, and be ready to. So the government spending has to increase, but then ensuring that the spending does not result only in wastage. It should be aimed at promoting economic growth and manufacturing and exports. That's the most important thing. So that's why radical economic reforms and the sustainable development is required along with heightened government expenditure. That's the way out. Let's hope that the government does it. Thank you.